Talk about the evidence of war crimes Americans and other people need to understand, so that we're very clear about what the Russians did and why accountability matters.
I think that goes back to what I said before, that if you see these murdered civilians and mass graves and all this stuff on the TV and you don't believe it, I'm telling you, it is real. It is true. The Russians are actually doing these things, and they definitely need to be held accountable. I mean, even when our torture stopped, the war crime stopped, we were still every single human rights violation that can exist. They were doing that to us. It was incredibly poor diet, dirty water. The Red Cross was not allowed to access us. Right. Everything that they could do to just dehumanize us was done. Again, I'm living proof of some of the things they're doing. And if you don't believe me, come talk to me.
Did they do? I know in some other situations, and I know it happened here in the last year, mock execution routine. Mm-hmm. Did they the dry chambering or any of those things?
Yeah,
they do that stuff
several times.
Yeah. Were they doing it to more than you and Andy as a sort of SOP with that? It was the best of your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, it was primarily, most of the time when it happened, it was that first 24 hours at the soldier camp, and it was when the higher ranking officers showed up. Honestly, by and large, the privates out there, it was kind of soldiers treating soldiers like soldiers. They were just following orders. If they smoked a cigarette, they were like, you know what, I bet you that guy would like a cigarette, and they'd give me one. Right. I mean, they really didn't care. But when the officers came by, every time it was on your knees, blindfolds, gun to your head, all that kind of stuff. And then during the interrogations in the week in Russia, there was some of that too. Guns cocked and put to my knee and put to Andy's head, stuff like that. But yeah.
Without naming names unless you want to, is there someone that gave you the skill set before those days that you would like to say, hey, even if it's symbolically, like, hey, by the way, you guys, you got me through, and
honestly, not really. I mean, in the U.S. military, we all undergo a little bit of POW training, but the advanced stuff is for the advanced guys, and I was not advanced. So I had the barest minimum of training. I would like to say thank you to the VA because I had PTSD from Iraq, and when I finally started seeking treatment for that, I got a lot of tools in my toolbox that I was able to use while in captivity, and then finally when we were put back together in the prison, I could help Andy.
Tell me a couple, just because I'm interested in how that. What would be a couple examples? Something that you you suddenly had to deploy that was in your arsenal, in your toolkit.
I mean, a lot of it's kind of the after effects, like the basic therapy thing that I use all the time is like I have some kind of a car backfires or a balloon pops or there's something that causes me to have a reaction, and instead of just overreacting to that feeling, I stop and I say, well, what happened? How am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? And is it legitimate?
And what to do?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, it might have been a bomb and I need to react, or it might have been just a balloon and I don't need to do anything. So, am I reacting legitimately? But I think the biggest thing that I passed on to Andy was, we'd always go back and forth between if we get out of here and when we get out of here.
Right.
But I'd say when we get out of here and you're back with your loved ones, on the good days, that's when you need to just stop and say, hey, I'm having a great day with you. This is wonderful. I love you. I appreciate you. It's not always going to be this way. And when I'm angry, when I'm frustrated, when I'm freaking out, when I'm panicking, I'm not going to be able to express these things to you. So I want to express them now. Amen. So that you're ready for it.
And how important, I'd like those who see this interview to really think about that camaraderie and how that got both of you through. And what responsibility did you feel to him in your capacity? When we the two of us were facing a T-72 tank, and that'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it. We found a little shell scrape we could both fit into. We jumped in there, and Andy turned to me and he said, "I've decided I want to live." And I'm like, cool, man. That's my mission in life now. The only thing I have to do is keep Andy alive. Yeah. So I mean, even we were separated for the first month and a half-ish. And my constant fear was that they had killed Andy without me knowing about it.
Wow.
And so when we finally got reunited there in the prison, the isolation prison, like it was so amazing to have my brother back. I mean, we're brothers for life. And we really got a chance to bond there in that prison because we spent 23 hours in the cell together. I mean, we had nothing to do besides talk to each other and play mental games. And we made a chess set out of trash and we played chess all the time. Just anything to keep our minds active and try and keep our sanity in that situation, because we were on death row in a Russian prison.
Yeah, it was one of the things that was said was we don't know what they could face death.
And, we were going through the kangaroo court process in Donetsk to give us the death penalty. Yeah.
In that situation in Donetsk, the power structure was entirely under the Russian control.
Oh yeah, 100%.
FSB.
FSB. Yeah, you could tell when they entered the room that all the DPR personnel were like, oh shit, the big bosses are here. Yeah.
Right. Why is this war so different? Since you served in Iraq and you know that's flavor. Why is this one so different?
I get asked that question a lot, and my first answer is always, at least this time, the enemy is in uniform. You know, that is a major difference where we can tell who the enemy is.
Right.
I mean, that helps, but then, you know, it's an organized army that they don't just have IEDs and grenades. They've got tanks and drones and planes and artillery, and you know, we've got this weird mix of fighting World War I trench warfare in the 21st century where we've got drones to worry about. Drones have completely changed every aspect of the battlefield in terms of how you attack, how you recon, how you take cover. There was a lot of times when Andy and I were trying to make our way back to base that artillery and mortars would start coming in, and you know, in that situation you find a hole, right? You get as low to the ground as you can, you find a hole, and you just pray. And then we find a hole and look up and go, we don't have any tree cover, we've got to move. Right. You know, because there's drones. So it's a very, very different battle. It's a very interesting battle. I mean, there's still elements of the Iraq War too. The Russians are making explosively formed projectiles, EFPs, and using those. And that was, I mean, that got invented during Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's a really weird mix of World War I, trench warfare, modern warfare. Yeah, it's weird.
You were mentioning ATACMS and the tools that are applied and needed. One story that came out this week was the investigation of about a year ago when 58 Azovstal fighters were killed in a controlled attack, and I know that some at the time tried to fog the idea that you and Aiden and these other might be in that mix. How close were you to any of that, since the propaganda at the time tried to conflate that maybe the Americans were at risk?
Yeah, we were in the isolation prison at that point. We heard about it. It was a different prison. I think it might have been the one that Aiden and the Croatian were at, because they were not in the same prison as us, but I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I know when we first arrived at the prison, I had to do the forced phone calls to the State Department of my mother, and I was able to tell my mother, hey, like we've been moved. It's a better location, because I wasn't in solitary confinement only eating moldy bread. So I mean, it was a slightly better situation, and from that they could infer that yeah, we were in a prison. Right. And then I think it was a day or two later that prison got bombed, and they didn't have me call home for another 2 weeks. So yeah, my family was pretty sure I was in that prison.
When you see the current situation with this counteroffensive, and the argument recently happened about cluster munitions, and now, you know, there's the moral high ground in America and the rest of the world is understandable. But explain to someone back home that, no, wait a minute, here's what you have to understand how it's been deployed now. Have you had any insight on that, how that's working?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, people need to realize that since the start of the war, Russia's been using cluster munitions and lewisite, and I mean all kinds of horrible things that most of the world has banned. So, you know, kind of they're getting a taste of their own medicine. But I will say that the Ukrainians are using the cluster munitions exactly the way they were intended, and they are proving to be very, very successful. We're actually starting to, where you know, the counteroffensive was just plodding along and not really making any progress. Once we started deploying the cluster munitions, we've made progress in the south. Like things are working; they're being used correctly.
In the United States, once your release was secured, essentially, or it was in motion, and you were coming home, can you tell me about some officials that really you would like to say, hey, I mean, they were really there for me and Andy? Yeah,
I won't mention his name, but in particular, our State Department representative.
Good.
He had been assigned to our case and our case only. The entire time we were in captivity, he contacted our families every single day, even to say, hey, I don't have any news, but I just want to check in on you.
Right.
I can say that the U.S. government, not being an active participant in this war, they were very limited on what they could do, but everything that they could do, they did.
Right.
And I really feel like, yeah, there were a lot of them. Two of our Congress people, Representative Sewell and Representative Adderholt from Alabama, Senator Shelby's staff, they took care of our families, and they did everything they could to push the Ukrainian government to do something to get us released.
How's Diesel doing?
He's doing great. I mean, he's probably very upset that I'm over here. I'm sure he's missing me, but he loves his grandma, so you know she takes good care of him.
Well, the rain's trying to come down, so we're gonna wrap on that. But
yeah,
hey,
awesome.
man, big love to you.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.